Those of you who joined late yesterday, I hope that you all are aware that tomorrow you have the test, right? The second test will be tomorrow, and so make sure that you come prepared. The second test, actually, I will tell you, will be slightly more difficult than the first one, just to give you a little bit of idea. More or less, it's not difficult. I wouldn't call it difficult, but some of the questions will be little, little tricky type. And so if you have got good insight into the things, you should be able to do fairly well, right? So it should not be difficult. And but what is required is simply, if you are reading the slides, that will not be enough, right? You have to, as I have been telling you that time to time, that you will have to have little, detailed understanding beyond whatever I have said in the class, right? But I think grossly everything should be fine for you. And this is regarding the test tomorrow. Yeah, so on Wednesday you will have your project evaluations. There won't be any extension. There is no scope for extension, right? There is no room at all for any further extension. So please make sure that you do not request any extension beyond Wednesday. On Wednesday, everybody is going to be evaluated. Okay. So if a group is not able to present, actually that will seriously affect their grades. Huh? Yeah. So yeah, so let me now start the remaining things that will have to be covered. And yeah, so you all able to see my slide?
No, sir.
Okay. Let me just check. Yeah. So yeah. Here. Yeah. Is it visible now?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. So so there are only a couple of more concepts. So yesterday we were talking about this cloud federation, right? Federation of clouds, as you have seen in the figure, if you remember, that we are talking about in a cloud federation. Basically, different cloud services provided by different cloud service providers, like shown as shown in this particular figure. So there are different consumers who are going to be not only so they are not going to be simply actually, I mean, they are going to be connected to one cloud service, but the thing is that within the cloud, if there is some resources that are not available because of the interconnectivity, these resources are going to be pulled from the other cloud service providers, right? So cloud service federation is becoming very popular in terms of cloud delivery, cloud service delivery. And yeah, so there is something called the Geneva framework for cloud federation, right? So it was actually developed by Microsoft, and it takes care of certain issues like having some kind of a unified framework, a common framework for accessing different applications and different systems seamlessly, right? So basically, again, it's talking about some kind of a guideline, some kind of a common framework for accessing applications and systems through the cloud. So basically, whenever cloud service providers, whenever they talk about cloud federation, they are actually talking about using this framework to to establish the interaction between these different cloud service providers, right? And there are different protocols that basically help to serve this kind of model, and particularly with respect to security, authentication protocols are there, because this is very important, right? Because first of all, in cloud itself, the security is very concerning, and then on top, if you are talking about an environment where there are multiple clouds and they are going to talk to each other, so the security is very important. So all these aspects like authentication, authorization, so all of these will have to be revisited, right? So, and this is what basically is of concern to cloud federations. So this is just, that was just the concept. There is another thing that I also wanted to touch upon in the context of cloud federation, is the use of XMPP protocol, right? So for establishing these cloud federation models, there is one of these protocols, XMPP protocols, which is commonly used, and along with that there is the other protocol, which is the XCP. So XMPP is Extensible Messaging and Presence Protocol, and XCP is Extensible Communications Platform. So these two things are basically used in order to set up this inter-domain kind of communication in the federation. So so both of these are used, and there are actually XMPP. You need to know about XMPP in more detail, but because this is a completely different dimension of understanding, so I'm not going deep into XMPP. So basically, what happens is XMPP. XMPP basically gives you a platform for the use of messaging services across different applications that are basically being served through this cloud federation. So it has certain advantages like the ones that are listed over here. Particularly, it offers you certain levels of security. TLS, there is something called transport layer security, and SASL, simple authentication and security layer, which are basically which are explicitly there in XMPP in order to offer this security. There are different levels of cloud federations that are there, which can be classified into 4 types. One is called the permissive federation, second is called the verified federation, third is the encrypted, and the fourth one is the trusted. So 4 levels of cloud federations. So permissive federation, basically here an XMPP server, it accepts a connection request from another XMPP server without verifying the identity. So it already has the permission, right? It is permissive cloud federation. So in this kind of federation, there are no DNS lookups, there is no certificate checking, and the major problem with this kind of federation is basically something called domain spoofing. So in domain spoofing, basically there is an unauthorized third party who can pretend to be another authorized domain and can basically hurt the successful working of this framework. In verified cloud federation, the XMPP server accepts the connection request from the other XMPP servers, but it does so not in a permissive way, but after verifying the identity. Only after that it is going to be. In the previous one, there was no verification of identity when the request from other XMPP servers was accepted. But here, in the verified one, only after verifying the identity, the request from the other XMPP server is going to be, it is going to be accepted. So here, in contrast to the previous one, the permissive one, here, this framework basically uses the DNS lookups and domain specific key exchange to verify the identity of the other XMPP servers. And previously, what was there? There was no domain lookups. Okay, there was no domain lookup, there was no certificate checking. But here you have, so these kind of domain lookups and domain specific key exchange, these are used in order to verify the identity of the other XMPP servers which send the connection request to a particular XMPP server. So the problem of domain spoofing, which was there in the permissive model, is not present in this federation. This is an advantage. But there are different other problems like something called DNS poisoning attack, which can be a threat even to this kind of federation, right? So you get rid of the domain spoofing problem, but again, there are other problems like DNS poisoning attack, which could be performed even in this kind of federation. So the third one is basically the encrypted cloud federation, where the XMPP server requests a connection request from the other servers after not only verifying the identity and also by ensuring that the connection requests are encrypted. So the identity is verified like before, but in addition, the connection requests are encrypted. So the security over here in this model is offered through the TLS layer, and there are these digital certificates which are used for providing security. Okay, the trusted cloud federation accepts the connection request from other trusted XMPP servers. So you need to already have some pre-trusted XMPP servers already to be there, and within that trusted group of servers, these requests are going to be used. So the trust is already, the trusted group is already established. So so this, how is this established? So basically there is something called the root certificate authority, which makes the trusted XMPP server by providing a digital certificate. Okay, so this digital certificate is given to a particular XMPP server. So everybody has their own digital certificates, and so basically everybody within a particular domain, within a particular root certifying authority, they all have their trusted their digital certificate. So they are all going to be trusted within that particular domain, right? So the authenticating server basically authenticates the digital certificates before accepting the connection request, and the trusted digital certificates provide the strong security compared to other cloud federations. So this trusted cloud federation is relatively stronger in terms of the security, because security is a major concern over here, as you have seen. Like whenever we are talking about multi-cloud, where there are multiple service cloud service providers, security is a major concern, right? So this is why all these different models of cloud federation are there, and the trusted one basically is good in terms of its security offering. So what is the future of cloud federation? The objective of cloud federation is to seamlessly interact between people, devices, information feeds, documents, application interfaces, and cloud service providers. It enables the cloud service providers and the software developers to integrate and deploy efficient, highly scalable, easily scalable, fault tolerant, and heterogeneous cloud services. Okay, so these so together basically so this kind of benefit in terms of sharing of different types of information between people who are interacting, between different devices which interact, between sharing of information feeds, documents, etc. So these are all the different advantages, and as you know, particularly in the social media world, basically these have become very important, right? So so future is towards the cloud federation in the cloud computing. So that was a brief about cloud federation. It is basically a topic of research. It is a hot topic of research in cloud computing. So there are many researchers who work on cloud computing who across the world who work on cloud federations, because of the advantages and the promises it holds, right? But again, there are several challenges, including the security challenges, and some of which we have seen how they could be overcome through some of these models. But still, there are so many different other challenges that are there. So this is one. Second thing that I also wanted to touch upon today is the issue of privacy. So privacy in cloud computing is very, very concerning. So why it is concerning? Because whenever you are talking about cloud connectivity for storage of the data, so you are essentially talking about servers in the servers for which are basically used by the cloud service providers. In these servers, these data are going to be stored, right? All the data that are pumped into the cloud service provider cloud infrastructure, basically these data are going to be stored over there, and you do not know, as a consumer, as a user, you do not know what are so where your data is going to be actually stored, right? You know that you are using an Amazon cloud, right? But where is that server? As a user, you are completely blind about where the server is, where this processing is going to happen. and whether there are adequate measures in place in order to protect your privacy, whether there is any kind of attack which can steal the data that you have. So this privacy becomes a very important concern in the context of cloud computing, right? Because many times we are talking about sensitive data, many times we are talking about personal data, and how can privacy be protected? So for protecting privacy, one of the ways is to adopt security measures, right? And so you are going to have a set of policies, a set of practices which are going to ensure the confidentiality of the data, the availability and the integrity of the data, right? So security, basically, to adopt to achieve privacy, you use these computational mechanisms of security techniques, which are going to ensure indirectly the privacy of the data, right? So one of the ways is basically, one of the very commonest ways of ensuring privacy is basically using something called hashing, right? So hash based mechanisms. I think many of you who have little bit of understanding about security, you may be aware of how hashing techniques are used, hashing based techniques are used to ensure security, message security, and thereby protecting the privacy of the data, right? So data privacy is a crucial aspect of any business organization. Ultimately what is happening is, through the use of cloud, um, essentially the data are outsourced to some unknown territory, and often these data are basically used, these data basically they cross the individual national borders as well, right? Because you do not know these servers, Amazon cloud, right? Even if you are using it in India, your data may be stored somewhere in some other country, right? So it is a cross border kind of problem which will have to be taken into account, right? So how you are going to ensure that whether adequate uh, privacy is being maintained? So so there are, so this is the issue, and like this, actually, to overcome this issue, a lot of research is going ongoing. A lot of solutions you will find which talk about how privacy can be ensured in a cloud computing kind of model. So from the consumer's perspective, the challenges of cloud privacy is that you do not know the location of their data, of the data that are going to be stored in the cloud. You enroll to the cloud and you feel that your data is secured. You do not know. Even the Gmail, right? Even many of the Google services like Google Storage, etc., etc. So this is, there are actually privacy concerns that are commonly there. People do not know where, so you do not know whether your mail is basically, the contents of your email are being viewed by somebody else who you do not want to view it, right? Because nothing is protected in that sense. So who can or who can't access the data, who keeps the data, these are certain things which are very concerning. So from the CSP's perspective, cloud service providers perspective, so due to the support of multi-tenancy features, the cloud service provider has to ensure that the data of its tenants is not accessed by the unauthorized tenants. So whoever is authorized, they are supposed to get access to the data. Others should not. So so this is basically what the cloud service provider has to ensure. So there are so many privacy laws that are that are in effect, so many different legislation. There are certain practices like something called the fair information practices. There are certain European initiatives. There is the HIPAA, which is basically talking about health data privacy in the US, which is also used in Canada, where I used to live, and I used to do a lot of work in the healthcare sector, and so I'm quite aware of these HIPAA laws. And yeah, so like this, actually, so there are so many, particularly these are geographically prevalent laws for protecting privacy. In India, actually, I'm not very sure whether we have any kind of privacy laws for the protection of the data, right? So when we are talking about the uh, the the private data, these are of different types, right? So these data, they can be, so there is something called personally identifiable information. So this personally identifiable information basically can be used to identify an individual pinpointed, right? So for example, if you know somebody's name, if one of the attributes along with the data, has a name or a phone number or a social security number or our Aadhaar card in our country, or any kind of email address, and so using these basically you can pinpoint, you can personally identify a particular person, right? So this type of data is very sensitive, right? And there is something called quasi identifier. So these attributes are used for linking the anonymized data set with other data sets and then identifying individuals. So for example, a combination of the zip code and date of birth and maybe some other features like address, etc., can be used to not pinpoint the individuals but get a rough estimate of from which locality this data has come and so on. So these are the quasi identifiers. So sensitive information, so membership data, for example, demographic characteristics like gender, etc., finance data, health card information or credit card information, or any other sensitive data, health data, for example, if somebody is suffering from some kind of a terminal disease or any kind of disease, so these are actually sensitive data, right? So you have to protect the privacy of this kind of data, right? And you have to ensure that when you are storing this data or when you are transferring it to through some network, so these data should not be personally identifiable, right? Because if somebody gets access to it, it may not be acceptable to others, right? It may not be acceptable to me. I do not want others to know that I am suffering from a particular disease. I do not want in certain contexts for others to know that I am working for a particular job. So like that, actually there are certain things which are very sensitive and will have to be protected. So I was telling you that in US there is something called the Fair Information Practices, so where basically the FIP data protection principles are used. So for example, the data collection limitation, purpose specification, purpose use limitation, individual participation, visibility and transparency, compliance of data, and accountability of the data. So I'm not going through each of these because we do not have time, but just for your information that fair information practices are there to provide some level of protection of the privacy, but this is basically US based, right? FIP. So so basically, when you are talking about cloud, in the context of cloud, privacy issues, cover the different attributes. For example, the actors who are involved, the lack of the user control, dynamic nature of the cloud environment, compliance with the laws, the local, national, and so on, and the users' preferences and the accountability. These are actually some of the different attributes that concern, concern privacy issues. So these actors, for example, who are the ones who are involved in the handling of the data? The data owner, the cloud service provider, the cloud service broker. Then whether there are administrators who are there, third party who all are involved in the handling of the data that are being stored in the cloud. So this is basically this cloud system model and the involved actors, and pictorially depicted like this. Lack of user control. So public cloud data is stored in the remote server of the cloud service providers. The owner of the data is unaware of the data processing, data access, storage locations, any privacy violation occurring or not. So for example, when you are using something like Dropbox, right, you do not know their actual data handling policy. You do not know, you simply upload the file, you simply upload the data, but you do not know how Dropbox is handling your data, right? So user doesn't have any control, right? So the business data that are stored in the cloud can be used for providing advertisement by the CSPs, and many times we have seen that also. I myself, I do not remember where exactly, but one thing that I remember is that I have seen that based on let us say the data that are stored, I often see advertisements which basically might be of interest to me, right? So user doesn't have any control, right? So okay, so like this, actually the dynamic nature of the cloud environment also creates problems with respect to privacy. So the dynamic algorithms are used for storage and transferring of data in the cloud. Trans-border cloud imposes several restrictions on the data handling policy, because every country basically has its own different policies in place, and some countries don't even have any kind of policy. So in a kind of trans-border cloud environment, the data is flowing from one country to another, so one policy environment to another policy environment. And so basically, protecting the data, the privacy of the data across this kind of trans-border kind of scenario is a challenging thing. So yeah, so I'm going to skip this. And finally, the last thing that I wanted to touch upon is the issue of accountability. So so accountability basically is the obligation to act as a responsible steward of the personal information of others, to take responsibility for the protection and appropriate use of that information beyond mere legal requirements, and to be accountable for any misuse of that information. So this is something that I have taken from the definition of accountability in a famous project, the Galway project. So basically, so here basically accountability talks about that if there is any mishandling of the data, then who is to be held accountable, right? So there has to be some kind of third-party auditing mechanism, which should be taking care of, or which should be checking this compliance with the proper handling of the data. And if there isn't proper handling of the data, then so the misused the entities, the actors who misuse the data, they should be held accountable. So in cloud, basically the accountability of the data is very much required because of all these factors like the ones that I told you. And this accountability is going to help the cloud consumer to know where the data are actually located, who is the processor of the data, who are accessing the data, and so there will be greater transparency. So the main problem is that in cloud you do not have transparency about the storage and handling of your data. So accountability basically will ensure that the consumer knows about how the data is being handled, where it is being stored, who are the actors who are going to use it, and how the data are going to be accessed across. Okay, so there are actually different types of techniques that are in place for protecting the privacy of the data. And so most of these basically you will see are based on the security principles. Encryption is a very common security mechanism for ensuring privacy. Then there are, so there are many others which are also listed over here. In the interest of time, I'm not going to go through them individually, but I leave it over here. So for you, so these are some of these. Obfuscation I would like to touch upon. Basically, obfuscation of data is a privacy preserving technique where the data are masked using certain rules. And this is how basically hashing that I was telling you is basically one of the ways to obfuscate the data, right, to mask the data. So like this, actually there are different other ways also in which the privacy of the data could be protected, right? And these were the ones that I just flipped through. So I would encourage you to please go through them at your leisure. So this is basically one thing that I wanted to finish upon. Do you have any question? Anybody has any question? Because I next want to touch upon something else very quickly. Okay, so let us do one thing, that I'm going to show you some of the case studies. Actually, I plan to go through them in more detail. Each of these slides actually that I'm doing little bit of hurry. so I just wanted to do this in more detail, but we do not have time. We have lost few classes due to these holidays and elections. But let me just quickly do a few things. Yeah, so let me are you able to see this slide, or is it gone?
No, sir.
No, sir.
uh, I have to do it again, I think. Yeah, just give me a moment. Agriculture. Yeah, so here. Okay, so I just wanted to show you few case studies. Okay, and these case studies, are you able to see now? Is it visible?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so don't worry. These are sufficiently detailed, but I'm not going to go through them in too much of detail. I just wanted to expose you, and that's it. Okay, so so cloud computing is has got a lot of applications, and you yourselves, you must have witnessed that many of your in your projects, or many of your other friends projects, they are using cloud, right? They are not innovating anything with the cloud, they are using cloud, right? So cloud is used across different application verticals. For example, agriculture, for example, healthcare, for example, manufacturing industries, for example, space. Like that, actually different application domains cloud is being used. So three application domains I just wanted you to be exposed of. What is the state of the art in terms of the use of cloud for serving certain application domains like the ones that I just mentioned. So first thing that I'm going to do, I'm going to show you the applications of cloud computing in agriculture. So 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 let us say that when we are talking about agriculture, there are several problems, right? So in the context of agriculture, people talk about problems with respect to plant phenology, the problems with respect to the soil, with irrigation, with pests, with diseases, pests and diseases, and also there is something called harvesting and post harvesting, right? So you see that each of these different phases of agriculture is also, it's quite vast, it is quite vastly varied. The reason being that you know there is so much of knowledge that is required, there is so much of data, and each of these is also going, these vary depending on the type of the plant. So for example, I will just give you an example from my personal experience, because I also have been working on different projects in agriculture. So for example, paddy plants, right? The phenological conditions for paddy plant and the phenological conditions for wheat, for example, are completely different. The soil condition that is required for paddy plant is completely different from the soil conditions that are required for wheat. So how do you keep track of, whenever you are talking about not a very small scale agriculture, but large scale agriculture? There is, number one, all this varied knowledge which will have to be stored appropriately and made accessible for making sense out of the data that are stored, for making it available for appropriate levels of decision making to the farmers at different stages of the crop growth and agriculture. So basically, how do you keep track of it? So for that, you can use cloud computing. Cloud computing can help you to a large extent to address some of these different issues, right? So yeah, so you please go through, whatever I told you was basically the summary of what is there in the slide. I want you to go through the slides in detail, but let me just give you some interesting yeah. So with cloud integration, it is possible to give different types of advisory right, to the farmers, to the other stakeholders, in the form of audios, in the form of text messages, based on different types of forecasts, predictions. Prediction means what? You have to use different machine learning algorithms, right? So where are you going to learn, execute these machine learning algorithms? You need so much of computational power. So cloud basically is an attractive solution to be used to address these kind of issues. So based on the weather forecasts, crop calendars, pest diseases, their prevention, their control, market dynamics, etc. The intended stakeholders like farmers or the local, governing bodies like panchayats, etc. They could be sent advisory in the form of audio or text messages. And this is basically part of the e-government projects in our country. It is already, many of these things are already being attempted. So the whole idea is to offer early warnings on upcoming weather conditions such as cyclones, droughts, rain, provide market price information, offer predictions, offer market forecasts so that the farmers can get the best possible price, providing information on new seeds, inputs, technology. So all of these basically, storage of this data, huge database of data, huge database of corresponding information and knowledge, and offering these as services after appropriate levels of processing to help the farmers in forecasting what is ahead of them, what is ahead of the season in which a certain plant is being planned to be grown. So all of these basically can be done with the help of appropriate cloud computing integration. So many things like farm advisory services, monitoring, evaluation, tracing the farm produce, so something like supply chain, right? So farm produce traceability, then farm data management, all of these basically required extensive computational services in the form of storage and processing. So cloud basically is a natural choice nowadays in agriculture, for doing all of these different types of tasks. Okay. So supply chain management, forecasting the volume and the plan, and planning the harvest schedule based on the yield estimation, crop area and crop calendar. So digitization of various farmer organizations, farmer groups, tracking the current location of the produce through GPS tracking. So these are actually different things that could be done with the help of cloud computing, and these are very computationally extensive, and that is why cloud is a natural choice. Other things like offering different financial plans, financial services, so taking care of the agricultural value chain, taking care of credits, insurance. Insurance is a very important thing nowadays, right? Because many farmers, they basically, due to weather or many other reasons, basically they lose several months of their hard work, right? The crops get damaged due to snow, hail, or whatever, right? So taking care of all of these basically through appropriate financial services like insurance, etc. So this also is computationally intensive and requires integration with cloud computing. So there is something called the source trace, right? The source trace, basically, it's a cloud model for use in agriculture, which gives you some kind of a digital solution, and together it is known as the Krishi Pragati Foundation. So the Krishi Pragati Foundation, basically it uses the source trace to give the digital solutions to the farmers. So a source trace is basically nothing but a cloud framework for agriculture. So so these are there. I'm not going to go through read through them, but the cloud is used by the KPF, right? Krishi Pragati Foundation, they use cloud, the source trace, to give the digital solution, and it is a global leader in providing digital solutions to agriculture and food businesses. So this is basically how this particular software, the Krishi Pragati Foundation source trace software, looks like. This is a screenshot. It gives the software as a service solution. So source trace is basically a software as a service, right? Source trace is a software as a service solution, and it can help in agricultural value chain management, by making farming sustainable, making the supply chains efficient and bringing transparency and traceability in the food trade across different countries, right? So basically this KPF basically it uses this source trace, right? Yeah, so there are several advantages of adoption of cloud computing. It decreases manpower requirement. It gives you paperless kind of platform for storing your data. It is efficient in terms of processing of the data. Creates visibility, improve transparency, and improves the agility of the supply chain. Because agility of the supply chain means what? The different hops in the supply chain, basically, these could be these could be performed, these could be executed in less duration of time. So basically, as in a nutshell, it helps in bridging the gap between the farmer and the consumer. Okay. So yeah, so this is just a conclusion, and this thing. So this is just what I wanted to touch upon, is to impress upon you how cloud computing can basically help in revolutionizing fields like agriculture, which is completely off. Normally we wouldn't think about integration of cloud computing in agriculture, but as you can see that people are already doing it. Cloud computing can basically help to improve the overall efficiency, the performance, the agility of supply chains of the agricultural production activity, etc. So everything can be improved with the help of cloud integration. So this is one. Second thing that I wanted to show you, again, let me share. Was it shared, the previous set of slide? Okay, so the second one is basically the healthcare. Okay, so here actually, like agriculture, in healthcare, and in healthcare it is even more so. So healthcare basically is very much data intensive, right? So healthcare is extremely data intensive. Lot of data gets produced in real time, and how do you manage this data? Where is the data going to be stored? And medical knowledge base, medical recommender systems, then these knowledge based systems, so all of these are quite popular things, but everything is based on the data and the processing of the data, right? So in in healthcare, cloud computing is very attractive because cloud can help in basically the storage of this data and also the processing of the data, right? So the only thing that is problematic about use of healthcare data in and its integration with cloud computing is that privacy. In health, actually, compared to agriculture, in health, the privacy issues are very serious, right? Because individual patient data are going to be stored, so where and how you are going to store it, and all of these privacy issues that I was talking about a little while back. So all of these are very relevant in the context of healthcare. Not only relevant, these are much more important in the context of healthcare, right? So how you are going to do it? So although there is so much of attraction in terms of storing all that healthcare data on the cloud, but how the data are going to be stored and where, how the data are going to be handled, so these are very important issues. So so I'm not going to go through all of these. Please go through yourself, and yeah, so there are so many government initiatives which basically require electronic health records, their storage, and so on. There are many clinical innovations, because whenever you are talking about for example, new drugs or new types of medicines, etc. So here actually you are talking about lot of data. These are actually data intensive processes. So so clinical innovations of all kinds, including drug innovation and so on. So basically these required storage of the data and appropriately handling of the data. right? So basically cloud can help as usual to overcome some of these different problems, right? So there is also additionally there is something called the mobile health, and in mobile health basically we are talking about healthcare services being offered uh, through mobile systems, right? Through mobile systems. So mobile health, basically mobile health systems basically depend a lot on electronic health, which is the e-health. And so whenever you are talking about healthcare, cloud is already very attractive, and integration of these mobile technologies basically adds complexity to the overall problem, right? So e-health and m-health together, these could take advantage of the cloud, but the levels of complexity that are involved in the cloud integration, these are also little different. And researchers basically they work on, so I know of a lot of research on m-health and of obviously e-health. We do a lot of work on e-health, we do not do much on m-health, but m-health and e-health researchers, they have a lot of challenges in terms of use of cloud computing for for integration of the data, and use of cloud, integration of the services, and offering these services to the patients and the other stakeholders appropriately. So there are a lot of challenges, but there are a lot of attractions too. Okay, so this is the second thing, and very quickly the third case study that I had prepared for you is basically the other one, which is um, the which is the industry. Okay, so here let us first look at some of the benefits that the industries can take from cloud computing, right? So there are affordable data storage solutions that cloud offers. Flexibility is there. Security issues are obviously there, right? But automatic backup, automatic data recovery, you do not really have to, industries do not really have to invest time, effort for coming up with data backup and recovery solutions. Automated upgrades can be obtained with the help of cloud integration. Like this, actually, there are a lot of other issues like low maintenance, scalability, and so on. So industries, manufacturing industries, for example, or even other industries, they can benefit from this kind of cloud integration. But there are a lot of disadvantages too. One of the disadvantages is that cloud, basically these cloud servers are quite remotely located, right? So whenever you are talking about industries, and particularly whenever there is a real-time data processing requirement, sending all the data to the cloud is very time consuming, and it doesn't basically help in catering to these real-time requirements that are there for most of the industrial machinery, right? So on top of that, there are issues of network connection, network connection. So many times, you have connectivity issues, etc. There could be downtimes, downtimes of machinery, downtime of the network, and so on and so forth. So like that, actually, there are so many different disadvantages that are there in terms of the use of cloud in industries. So cloud orchestration basically is a combination of IT or cloud services from multiple system components, which can be IT resources or other cloud services. So the company basically needs to set up a governance unit for the arrangement, coordination, and the management of the cloud and its dependent non-cloud IT resources. Right. So this is basically how one of these cloud orchestration models may be created. This is taken from a Deloitte source document, and legacy systems basically would be like this, whereas the cloud integrated models in the industries could look something like this. Right. So that's all. I don't want to cover anything further, but I hope that you have got enough exposure in terms of the applications, the case studies, the different types of works. That could be done in terms of the application of cloud computing and its integration in the different application verticals. And time to time, we have shown you a lot of different types of videos about how cloud computing is being used in the industries, right? Because that is very important, how different industries are progressing with respect to the adoption and the innovation in cloud, right? So there are so many public cloud service providers, Google, Amazon, and many others, right? So almost like most of the major companies nowadays, not most but many of the major companies, they have their own cloud service offerings, right? So what are their advantages, disadvantages, comparisons, different types of components? So all of these, time to time throughout the semester, we have gone through. So why I'm telling you all of these is that now what you have to do is to assimilate, you have to integrate all of these things that you have learned throughout the entire semester. So we have learned bits and pieces of many things we have learned throughout the semester, but now what you have to do is these bits and pieces you have to put together in order to get a fair understanding, so that you can basically have you can appreciate the use of cloud computing technology in different spheres of life better. So so that's why it is very important, right? So that's all. We are already over time. So I would once again like to remind you that tomorrow we are going to have we are going to have the test. So please, all of you, come prepared. So whatever we have covered till today is going to be in the syllabus of the test. So all of you, please come prepared accordingly, right? And on Wednesday, once again, we'll have this project evaluations. Okay, no further extension can be given because we do not have the luxury, right? We do not have time, right? Okay,
Sir,
so yeah, please
yeah,
go
sir,
ahead.
we have another test starting exactly at 9. So could you please start at 7:45?
7:45? Why
Yeah,
7:45? No, we'll
we
do
have
one thing. Yeah, not 7:45. What we will do
but
is
7:50.
that we will finish it exactly in time, right? So 8 o'clock it starts, right? So 8 to 8:55 we'll have this, so that you will have 5 minutes gap to switch over and attend the other test. And anybody who has a test, if you want, you can finish early and you can leave at any time. Okay.
Sir, it will be better like if we can at least start 5 minutes early, like 7:55 to 7:50.
Yeah, the main problem is that yeah, okay, so let us see. So you come prepared. See, the thing is that it doesn't matter to you, I will tell you. It doesn't matter to you, right? Whether it is 5 minutes early or 10 minutes early, it will not matter to you much. Okay, but anyway, since you want, so we'll try. So tomorrow we'll start little early, 5 minutes early. I will try to give you the question paper. Okay, so all of you, please, students, then try to join early. Okay.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
Sir, are the
Yes.
case studies also included in the syllabus?
Yeah, everything is included. Everything is included basically. So the thing is that case studies, it's not very complicated, right? So if you have heard me, then that should be sufficient for you to answer any questions that you might get, right? And also the slides are going to be immediately made available to you. Please also go through the slides, not just hearing me. You could get some more details by going through the slides. So please go through them as well, right? It's very easy, actually, I will tell you. It's not anything not difficult. Yeah. So what I will try to do is that whatever I have covered today, it will be there in the syllabus. Some questions will be asked, but I will try to minimize that. Okay. uh, for whatever I have covered today, I will try to minimize. Till yesterday, you will have, whatever has been covered till yesterday. So we'll have more questions from those parts. Okay, and only little weightage on whatever I have covered today. Is this good for you?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
No. Any other question? Okay, so That's it. Yeah, so one more thing, in case I forget later on, maybe, all of us, we can turn on our videos if it is okay with you, so that we can have a class picture. We cannot have a physical picture, right? But at least, we can have this kind of virtual picture. So can I request you to, for a minute or half a minute, could you please turn on your videos, so that at least we have something in our memories for future, right? Yeah. So Pallav, could you try to maximize the coverage and take the pictures? And maybe, if not in one go, maybe you can take in, I think, or who is an expert? There is something called large gallery, right? Large gallery we use, but it doesn't cover everyone.
So there is a together mode, but it does not look good.
Which one? Which one? That one. That one doesn't look good. Correct. So let us do one thing. I use the large gallery, but it doesn't even cover everyone, right? Or any of you, whoever is an expert, could you try to take multiple pictures and send in the group? Who will volunteer? अरे क्लास में कौन ये एक्सपर्ट है, एक्सपर्ट फोटोग्राफर पता नहीं है? Achilles, you are smiling. I think you are the one. Achilles, can you volunteer to take some pictures?
Connected on my phone, so I cannot see everyone.
Anyway, so let us, and there is no other solution, right? No solution?
Sir, I think the together mode or the large gallery mode is only the best one.
Yeah, large. I am in the large gallery only, but still it is not covering everyone. So how to take care of it?
I don't know, sir.
Acha, chalo. So, whatever best I can, let me just take, and everyone, all of you, please also take your individual views, and I mean from your end, and let us share across. Okay.
So there is something like a together mode in it on the below the large gallery mode.
Yeah. But the together mode also, it doesn't. Does it cover everyone? It doesn't look good actually, but still,
Yes.
we can have that one too. So one of you can switch to the together mode, or I have to do it. Do you have access to it?
No, sir. It is individual thing. Means I can, even if I implement it, you won't be. You will be still seeing what you selected.
Acha, understood. So let me together mode also let me do. ठीक है, लेकिन ये भी उतना अच्छा नहीं है, चलेगा. Okay, so let me take a quick picture over here. Okay, so thank you everyone. Okay, so all the best to you. Come prepared tomorrow. Okay, bye.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, sir.